just think of pressure, Press, press. And then it's going to press on you. Press your ass. That's it. That's what pressure is. It's gonna press your ass. Yo, mga kabayo, what's up, and welcome to Inay. Thank you, our time and space to learn life lessons from lessons about life. We learned from the previous episode that the purpose of life is to just spread the energy of the universe. If all life is really just trying to do the same thing, then why are we all looking very different? Why are there plants, animals, bacteria, fungi, and a bunch of other organisms? Why? If you may, please do imagine a map, a world map, right now, in your head. What is it that you see? What kind of map do you see? Does it look something like this? I bet it does. For many of us, this is how we see the world. We sort of put borders around it and color it red for Japan, red, white, and blue for America. I don't know. And red, white, and blue, and yellow for the Philippines, whatever. This is what we call the political map, and yes, it is helpful, at least for our species, but for the rest of the species of the planet, this really does nothing for them. Whatever they do really need to use maps, which they don't, would be a map that looks something like this. The colors in this map represent the communities of plants and animals that live in a particular region. These communities are also known as biomes. Have you heard of terms like rainforest, desert, tundra, taiga, deciduous forests, coral ecosystems, kelp forests, whatnot, so on and so forth? And that tells us that life really is diverse, that in a particular place there is a different set of plants and animals that you're going to see compared to when you go to another different place on a different part of the surface of the earth. But why? Why? You guys remember my previous YouTube video about the earth? That thing about the earth and the shape of the earth and the way that the earth moves around the sun and on its axis and how it wobbles and tilts and all of that? That has an effect on everything that is on the surface of the earth. And one of the main things that we can observe that really do change at different points on the earth's surface would be how much sunlight you get at a particular area, how close you are to the nearest body of liquid water, the topography or the actual physical terrain. Those are the three main things that somehow influence the kind of life that appears wherever. Let's have a look at that map again. Have a really good look at the biome called tropical rainforest. This is the particular ecosystem that has many different kinds of species in a small amount of space. And where is that small amount of space? They're typically very close to the equator. The most amount of sunlight that hits the earth is at the equator.
What does that have to do with anything? Just sunlight. It's just the equator.
What is the sun? It is a source of energy of a lot of living things, particularly living things that can harness the power of the sun to produce their own food, photosynthetic organisms. Wherever there's a lot of that, of what they need, they're gonna flock to that place. This is like prime real estate. Places that get a constant, steady supply of just a lot of sunlight, there's probably a lot more life.
Of course, there will always be exceptions to the rule. There are what we call chemosynthetic organisms. They don't really need sunlight in order to be able to extract energy. There are also organisms like those, but for a majority of life on Earth, they kind of do rely on the sun.
A lot of life, actually all life on Earth needs water to survive. If there's no water, we all die. Does it make sense that life tends to gravitate towards water? Let's have a look at that map of biomes one more time. This time, let's look at the areas that are color-coded as desert. They're usually in huge land masses, the big continents. That's where the deserts are. Are they anywhere close to the coastlines? No. They're usually inland. They're pretty far from water compared to islands, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Hawaii. How close you are to a body of water isn't just in a spatial sense, like literally you have to be like next to it or away from it, but also in a temporal or seasonal sense. Humidity and rainfall in relation again to how close you are to fresh water. That's the wonderful thing about water. It's not just liquid always. It sometimes turns into vapor. And the air is like a sponge. It sucks up water vapor, and when it is soaked to the brim with water, that's when it decides, guys, we gotta drop the payload. So they just drop it wherever, and that is rain. In deserts, that's kind of what happens. There are certain times, like it would rain for days.
What do you think about the Nemo?
And plants dig that. So for a brief moment in time, they're like, yes, there's water. Going to live and party and make babies before all the water is gone. And when the water is gone, then yeah, it's time to pack your shit, guys. Proximity to water, not just in a spatial sense, but also in a temporal sense. How the water is distributed overall in a particular area can affect the kind of life that lives there. The next factor that influences what kind of life appears where is the overall terrain, the topography. We're going to really discuss altitude. What is altitude? Altitude is how high or how low you are relative to a particular reference. In our case, the reference that we have designated is what we call the sea level. One thing that you're going to notice when you go up a mountain is that it becomes a bit harder for you to breathe. As you increase your altitude, the air pressure decreases. The amount of air that's just pressing on you decreases. When you go deep into the ocean, this time the pressure increases. There's a lot of water on top of you. Not just water, but also the air that is on top of the water. That is all pressing on you. You feel like you're being squished when you're underwater. So that's what the terrain does. As you change your altitude, the pressure changes. Of course, life will also adapt accordingly. Not all organisms can withstand very low pressures or very high pressures. Thus far, everything that we have discussed, the amount of sunlight, proximity to water, topography, all of these factors influence temperature. Where there's a lot of sunlight, it's a lot hotter. Water is really good at stabilizing temperatures. It takes a while for the water to really get warm, and it also takes a while for the water to release all of that heat compared to land. The temperature fluctuations in deserts, it's like really cold at night and really hot during the day because the land heats up and loses heat really quickly. That's why water is really important at regulating temperature. Let's try to go up that mountain one more time and you're going to feel that it is colder. The influence of gravity is a lot less compared to when you're closer to the earth. The molecules and the particles of air that are there are a lot more widely spread because gravity is not bringing them together, so farther apart. There's less chances for them to collide. And what is heat? It's kinetic energy, remember? It's the collision of these molecules. Because there's less of that up there, it's colder. That's exactly what the sunlight, the water, the topography, the bottom line of it is almost always temperature. Why is life governed by temperature? We have molecules in our systems, proteins, and they're very temperature sensitive. They can only really work at an optimum temperature range. Anything colder or anything warmer, then they lose their shape and then they just become bleh. So these proteins shut down. If the proteins shut down, then life shuts down. At any point, you can choose any point on the surface of the earth and you will have just an endless combination of all of these different factors that I've mentioned. We haven't even discussed wind, the ocean currents, tides, the soil chemistry also influences the type of life that appears where. Many different combinations. Now you get very unique places. And if you get very unique places, it's not going to be for everybody. There's only going to be a certain strip of real estate for a particular type of species. The emerging pattern of all of what we've learned today is that typically, you get a lot more life in places where there's a nice constant supply of sunlight, where it's pretty close to bodies of liquid water, and where you get just that sweet spot of terrain where there's not too much pressure or not too little pressure, and where the temperature also just doesn't swing too much. It's just right. Somehow we've answered the question that life appears different because the places on Earth are very different. But that's the thing. Why can't we still just all be the same looking kind of thing? Because it is a scramble for these limited resources. Yes, there's a lot of sun at the equator, but can we all fit in the equator? Islands tend to have close proximity to water, or rivers, lakes, or streams, bodies of water. But are there rivers, lakes, and streams everywhere? Are all lands somehow really close to the oceans? No. So what are you gonna do with all of the real estate that's not close to water, that doesn't have enough sunlight? That's just gonna be a waste of space? But no. Life is genius. It adapts. It changes with whatever conditions nature throws at it.
Who lives in a pineapple under the sea?
To be able to survive at a particular place, you're going to need to change your game in order to live at that particular place. If you are going to try to cram your ass with everyone else at the equator, there's just not going to be enough space, not going to be enough resources for all of you over there. You either try and die or go away and live another day. Now it is time to go outside, have fun under the sun, and just observe. Just observing a place will give you sort of an insight into what kinds of organisms in general can live there. And flip it the other way around. Getting to know the life around you will tell you a lot about what kind of place you're in. It's like getting to know your neighbors. If you know your neighbors, then you have an idea of what kind of neighborhood you're in. If we look back at the two different maps that we just saw, the political map and of course the map of the biomes. One thing that you're going to notice is that nature does not really give a shit about political borders. It does not care about race. It does not care about what country you're from. Like, imagine butterflies that migrate from Mexico to North America. They're going to be like,
Fuck you, Donald Trump, and your wall.
You can tell them to go themselves.
You can't just say, oh, we're going to keep our corals safe and we'll be fine. And the rest of the countries around you, they don't give a shit about their corals. They just blast and then they overfish. No matter how much you take care of your own resources, the fish that are in there, they're gonna
just keep swimming, just keep swimming.
You can't tell your fish to just stay here in the Philippines. When we take care of something, we can't just say that this is mine. This is ours. All of this is ours. If you happen to get an opportunity to work in a different country and they're gonna be like, well, why are you working in that country? Why don't you just help your own country? You don't have to fucking care. Any living thing you help in any country is help. It's help also to the creatures in your country. All countries, just to all, to the entire earth. And that's the wonderful thing about nature. No such thing as borders. Everything is just interconnected. O paano naman kayo mga kabayo? What life lessons have you learned today? Leave it in the comments below. And if there's anything that I haven't discussed, or if you feel that I may not have discussed well, just leave it in the comments as well. Tell me if I'm wrong, please. Criticisms are very much welcome. We're all here to learn together, and if there's anything that I can learn from you, please share it in the comments as well. And if you guys want to know more about abiotic factors, things that influence diversity and life on Earth, I will leave a few of these channels right here for you to watch. And that's it, Pansit. Kita-kits mga bagits. Inay. Thank you.